Here we are. It is a Tuesday edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull. It is October the 18th, 2022. Unfortunately, we did not get a Guardians game last night, but we will this afternoon. We'll talk about that for a few minutes. But mostly today, we're going to be joined by Chris Fedor of Cleveland.com. He's been covering the Cavs for a while. He knows the team as well as anybody. And just like we're excited for this young, energetic, enthusiastic, and hard-playing Guardians team, the Cavs, to me, seem like the same type of team as the Guardians. Hustle, good guys, good players, young players. We're all excited about it. We'll break it down as they get ready to. NBA season starts tonight. The Cavs start their season tomorrow. Chris is on his way to Toronto today. We'll get to all of it coming up in the bullpen next.
Podcast is not for the faint of heart.
And I do think it's time for the Browns to move on.
It's not for those who ride the fence.
He's proven nothing.
But if you're looking for someone who tells it like it is about Cleveland sports,
everybody does fandom their way.
You've come to the right place.
I don't think he's any good.
It's time for the Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
You love him. Some of you hate him, but I think that's a badge of honor. Chris Fedor, my good friend from Cleveland.com. Chris, how are you?
Bull, I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I mean, this is a fun time of the year, right? I mean, you're a big Cleveland sports fan in general. I know that. What a time. I mean, obviously the Browns are struggling right now, you know, and until Watson comes back, we don't know really how good they are, although they're a disappointment. But between this Guardians team that's in the playoffs and this Cavs team that's about to start, and we'll get into mostly that with you in just a minute, it's a fun time to be a Cleveland fan. One of the most fun times probably, don't you think?
Yeah, it really is. And you said it in your intro, Bull. I think the exciting thing about the Guardians and the Cavs is that you've got young players that fans can grow along with.
Yeah.
It's funny because I've got a neighbor who's 2 houses down from me. He's 10 years old, loves the Cavs, and he loved Colin Sexton. But now he's going to love Donovan Mitchell, and it's not like a situation where you feel, okay, if I get attached to Donovan Mitchell or if I get attached to Darius Garland or Jared Allen, 2 years from now, those guys are going to be gone.
Right. It's a good point.
It's a really, really exciting time because you get to grow along with the team, and that's how I felt about the Indians of the mid-'90s.
Right.
When I started loving Manny Ramirez when he was sharing the outfield with Wayne Kirby, and I would go to Jacobs Field at the time, and I would look at the scoreboard and I would wait and see, okay, is it going to be Manny Ramirez in right field or is it going to be Wayne Kirby? And then you had all those other young guys that you could grow along with. It's really, really exciting when teams are like that.
Yeah, no doubt. And before we get to the Cavs, let's talk about the Guardians for a second. Obviously, the game gets rained out last night. It's so funny because for 3 hours, our fans were making fun of Yankee fans for wanting the game to be rained out. And then as soon as the game was rained out, then our fans started whining about having to play tomorrow. To me, the Guardians have the advantage in the bullpen. I get it. Some of their guys went, and now they'll get a little more rest. But ultimately, I don't think that advantage changes. I don't buy any grand conspiracy by obviously the TV networks would rather have the Yankees win than the Guardians. We all understand that. But I don't think this was some grand conspiracy. It was raining. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I don't think it was a conspiracy either. But I think, to your point, yes, the Guardians have the advantage in the bullpen. They were always going to have the advantage in the bullpen. But the Yankees bullpen is now aided by the fact that they get more rest for a lot of their high usage guys.
No doubt about it.
I mean, again, It's not anything that Major League Baseball can control. It was crappy weather in New York last night. You're not going to try and fight through that when the stakes are what they are. But I do think the Yankees are going to benefit from this extra day in a way where they probably would have been scrambling in Game 5.
I agree. It does benefit the Yankees. I just don't think it's this overwhelming benefit that some try to make it seem. I just don't think their guys are that good. I think the rest helps them, sure. But in the end, as long as we, assuming it's going to be Savali, and I don't know, maybe Terry will surprise us and go to Bieber on 3 days rest. Although generally, what's that?
Bieber's never pitched on 3 days rest.
Never. And guys these days don't do it. I mean, it's only in the playoffs once in a while, and it's generally not successful. But as long as you could survive the Savali innings, I think they got a good shot to win today. I really do.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I don't know what to expect from Savali, just given everything that he's been throughout the course of this year. It's clear that they don't have a ton of trust in him. Otherwise,
Right.
maybe they would have used him in a different kind of way, or maybe they would have set up their rotation in a different kind of way. But again, if you can just get it to that bullpen that has been dominant for the Guardians, you have to like your chances,
Yeah, no
even
doubt.
against the Yankees in that lineup.
100%. And I'll be back on tomorrow, obviously, to recap that. But I want to get to the Cavaliers, so I'm going to take a 30-second break. We're going to come back with Chris. We'll talk some Cavaliers basketball preview of the season coming up in just a sec. First, folks, let me tell you about Sleeper. Sleeper, the fastest-growing fantasy platform with the NFL season kicking off. Sleeper climbing the charts with over 4 million-plus users. In addition, they just launched 22 new features, including over-unders integrated into fantasy, the first sports contest game built into the fantasy experience. It's super simple. Any sport, choose 2 or more players you like, pick the over-under. For example, rushing yards in football, number of points in hoops. Then choose the amount of money you want to enter into the contest. If you pick correctly, you can win anywhere from 2 to over 20 times the money you put in. And you could play against your friends that are in your fantasy league and talk trash. That's what it's really all about, let's be honest. On your mobile phone, join our listener group at Sleeper at sleeper.com/lockedonbets or sleeper.com/lockedon today, and they'll automatically match your first deposit up to $100. Again, go to sleeper.com/lockedonbets or sleeper.com/lockedon today, and you get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. We bring Chris Fedor back in. Okay, the season is upon us, Chris. It's been an exciting offseason for the Cavaliers. First of all, let's go back to, because I haven't spoken to you in a while, at least on the air. We got to go back to the Donovan Mitchell trade. On between my podcast and the TV show, for a while we were talking about maybe the Cavs should trade for DeJounte Murray. I was fighting with people about this, blah, blah, blah. And they even got better because the guy they end up getting is even better than DeJounte Murray. What did you think about the trade at the time? And if you were the Cavaliers, I'll just ask you this way. What do you think was the toughest piece ultimately for them to give up as part of that deal?
I'll answer the second part first. Okay. I think Markkanen was. And it's not about him being the best player in the deal or the most talented or whatever the case may be. He was their best option to start at small forward coming into this year, and he made them different last year, Bull. Think about it. That 3 big lineup was something that caught a lot of teams off guard. It became sort of the Cavs' identity. So you're talking about trading in a wing-dominated league. You're talking about trading the Cavs' best option to play the small forward spot. His shooting, his floor spacing, his length, his athleticism, his defense, him, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen together, those 3 were a dominant defensive trio. The Cavs had a defensive rating of 102 with all 3 of those guys on the court, which would have been one of the best in the NBA. So replacing that obviously was hard for the Cavs. There was some pain involved in that. I still think they're trying to figure out how they're going to go about replacing Markkanen. But here's the thing, Bull. When you have the ability to add a talented player like Donovan Mitchell, that level of talent that the Cavs did not have, that level of playoff experience that the Cavs did not have, and then you factor in his age and his contract situation, you have to make that kind of deal.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it. And for the Cavs to have 4, we just saw, I know it's a fantasy draft and not reality, but you and I are in the middle of a fantasy draft right now, and 4 Cavaliers have been taken in the top 52 picks, right? And Mobley was 52, and I think by the time we have a fantasy draft next year, he's probably going to be a lot higher. I know you said you wanted to take him right when he went. I was going to take him this round also. I think a lot of people were thinking about it. Ultimately, what's interesting about the Cavs is they're one of the few teams in the NBA probably with 4 top 50 players. But at the moment, at least, correct me if you think I'm wrong, they don't have a top 10 player, right? So they have 4 really good players, but they're all somewhere between, 12 and 50 maybe. Ultimately, and we're going big picture now before we come back to the small picture, but ultimately, does Mobley have to develop into a top 10 player for them to win a championship?
Yes.
Okay.
And they know that.
Yeah.
I have a big feature on cleveland.com/Cavs this morning.
Okay.
It just went up. I've been working on it for 2 months. I talked to a lot of people inside and outside the organization that know Evan Mobley really, really well. And assistant coach Greg Buckner, who is JB Bickerstaff's right-hand man, told me point blank, we will not hang another banner unless Evan Mobley is our LeBron James.
Right.
And he said, I'm not comparing him to LeBron, but Evan needs to be a top 10 player for us to win another championship. You can't look at the Cavs down the road and say, Darius is the best player. Jared Allen's the best player.
Right.
Donovan Mitchell's the best player. For now, that's the way it's going to be because Evan just doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have the maturity. He hasn't seen enough throughout the course of his career in the NBA. But down the road, this has to become Evan Mobley's team.
Yeah. And because then if you think about it, if he becomes that kind of player, and then these other guys are like, if Jared Allen is your fourth best player, well, my God. And now from a defensive standpoint, it seems to me that Mobley is already elite, if not borderline, maybe borderline elite, if not elite. Is that fair? I mean, is it really 90% that's, the offense is what's got to really take the big steps?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the other thing when it comes to Mobley, it's hard to evaluate him and it's hard to give him all these different kinds of accolades that you may want to, because it's sometimes hard to see his possession to possession impact, right? Because he does a lot of things that don't necessarily show up that are really, really meaningful, that impact games for the Cavs. Like they can run defense the way that they want to run defense, in part because they have Evan Mobley.
Right.
Like offensively, they can function in a certain kind of way, in part because they have Evan Mobley. And like sometimes those things don't pop out at you. Sometimes they're not glaring, but it's like the little things from possession to possession that the Cavs are able to do because they have this 7-foot unicorn who moves like a guard and is equally comfortable on the perimeter as he is in the lane.
When you look at what fans in this town love, this as well as anybody, as almost as much as winning, maybe even more than winning, the fans of Cleveland love when they feel like the players love Cleveland and love each other. If the gets us meter is high, they love it. And we have that with the Guardians, right? It feels like the guys want to play here. It feels like the guys want to stay here. We don't know if they all will, obviously, unlike the Cavs. Their owner, the one negative with him has been he hasn't spent money, but we'll see. And it feels like the Cavs are the same thing. It seems like Donovan Mitchell from the outside, and you obviously would know better than me, it seems like he's fit in with the rest of these guys like a glove. It seems like it's great chemistry. Even Kevin Love, who seemed like a couple of years ago was a borderline bad teammate, and now he's completely turned it around. I don't know if he was, and maybe I'm exaggerating, but is this team as likable, and do they like each other as much as we think they do?
I asked Darius Garland throughout the course of training camp, and we understand, Bull. During training camp, it's exciting, it's fun, nobody's lost a game, everybody thinks that they have a chance. They're not sick of each other yet. They haven't gone on the road for these long road trips. So there are a lot of buts attached to this.
Sure.
In saying that, I asked Darius Garland about the vibes early on in training camp, and he turned to me and he said, they are immaculate.
Wow.
So the culture is something that JB Bickerstaff has worked on for years, right? And I think it's to a point where guys want to play here. Guys want to be part of this.
Yeah.
It's fun, but competitive, right? There's accountability, but there's also a little bit of a looseness and a joy. And I look at Darius Garland a lot, Bull, like Steph Curry. Not from the on-court perspective. I'm not saying Darius is going to be one of the greatest shooters of all time. But if you think about the Golden State culture,
right?
Like, it's fun. It's exciting. Guys want to go there. One, because they're competing for championships. But the other thing is, like, that's Steph's team.
Right.
They play a joyous style.
Well, unless they get punched in the face by Draymond.
Until that happens.
Yeah, but no, I get what you're saying.
Darius has that same kind of personality.
Yeah.
He draws people in. He's magnetic. And I do think the Cavs have a culture in place that is going to be lasting and is going to be something that will help them throughout some of the tougher points in the regular season, because that's what's going to happen. We know that every team is going to hit that. It's a very, very family-oriented environment.
And with, it wouldn't surprise me if they started off slow because obviously you're fitting in Donovan Mitchell. He's a huge piece, but he's new to the team. And as we know, like the NBA preseason, it's not that many games, So once the regular season starts, obviously you're playing a pretty good team in Toronto, or at least we think they're going to be pretty good. So would it surprise you? I mean, even when LeBron came back, remember his first year when they start 7-8 or something? So I guess it wouldn't surprise me if they got off to a little bit of a slow start, unlike last year. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm not going to be shocked, and certainly not going to panic if that happens.
To your point about that LeBron team, they even started 19-20 that first year.
That's right.
And there were different factors involved, right? Kyrie was learning how to be a winner. Kevin Love was going from the first option in Minnesota to the third option. Donovan's still going to have a huge part. And I think the exciting thing from a Cavs perspective, Bull, is that throughout the course of the preseason, and it was just a small sample size, and it was only preseason basketball. You can't take a lot into it.
Yeah.
But Darius and Donovan looked like they played well off each other. It looked like there was chemistry there. It looked like how the Cavs were using Darius worked for Darius and the Cavs, and how the Cavs were using Donovan worked for Donovan and the Cavs. And I think both kinds of players, it will allow them to work better with each other from the outset. Because at the end of last season, Bull, if you remember, Darius was essentially screaming for somebody to help him.
Yeah.
Take the ball handling pressure off of me.
Right.
Take the opposing defense's eyes off of me. And think about this. Darius and Donovan are both used to being the top name on the opposing scouting report. All the attention is on them. Now defenses can't approach them individually the same kind of way, and they can't approach the Cavs as a team the same kind of way. So I think Darius is going to help Donovan. I think Donovan's going to help Darius, and I think that's going to help some of the potential growing pains, especially early on.
We know this team has the 4 really good players, but there is some other good players and important players on this team. I know you recently wrote about Isaac Okoro. Are you, maybe there'll be some mix and matching about who ends up being the 5th starter with them.
Yep.
Talk about Okoro and the role you expect him to play on this team.
That's one of the things that I think the Cavs have going for them, Bull, is if you think about their top 7 players in their rotation, only one of them is new. One.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
Is Donovan Mitchell. The other 6 were here last year.
Right.
They were part of this system. They were part of this culture. They played with one another. And there were injuries and things along those lines.
Yep.
But that gives them a little bit of a head start. And of those 7, I do think Okoro is in that mix. I don't believe that he's going to start. I believe Karis LeVert is actually going to start at small forward because he gives more offense than Isaac Okoro does, more consistent offense than Isaac does at this point. And he's more of a threat to the opposing defense. And a lot of what the Cavs are trying to create is simplicity for Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. And if they have more space, if they have more offensive threats with them, it just makes the game easier on them. And I think it's going to make the game easier on their other teammates. So if Karis LeVert can give enough defense, that's the reason why you would go with Okoro at the starting small forward, right?
Right.
Let's protect Darius and Donovan from a defensive standpoint. Let's give Isaac Okoro those tough defensive matchups. But if Karis LeVert can handle those, and he had that role early in his career in Brooklyn, if the Cavs say to him, we're going to take a little bit off your plate offensively and give you more defensively, do that for us. I think that is a workable 3-man grouping for the Cavs. And I think that's a workable starting lineup for the Cavs. In fact, one of the coaches early on in training camp told me that they think they have so much offense in that potential 5-man lineup with LeVert at the 3 that they call it their own version of the death lineup. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, sure. It's 5 guys that could score 20 points on any night, right? So, I mean, not a lot of teams have that. I mentioned Kevin Love before. It felt like right after he re-signed, it seemed from the outside that there were times he was not being a good teammate. Yeah. And then last year, it seemed like, again, from the outside, that he couldn't have been a better teammate. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, he was miserable at times during this rebuild. And I talked to Kevin about it a bunch of different times. And the way that he phrased it to me was that it was a mind bleep.
Yeah,
right? So he leaves Minnesota searching for an opportunity to compete for championships. He got so pissed off in Minnesota because everything that he did, everything that he accomplished, all the individual accolades, it didn't lead to anything. He didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
His career didn't progress, and he didn't have opportunities in the playoffs. So he leaves Minnesota, he comes to Cleveland, and he chases championships for 4 straight years. And after getting to the top of the mountain and getting to that level that he always wanted to get to, both from an individual standpoint and a team standpoint, all of a sudden the Cavs go into this rebuild. And it's like, that messes with your head, man. Like, it's really, really difficult to go through rebuilds for players, especially ones that have been to the top of the mountain, like Kevin. So, yeah, he was miserable at times. And the other problem was, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but some of the players, some are still here on the Cavs right now, and some are gone. But at the time that Kevin was stepping into that leadership role that he accepted by signing the contract that he did, and at the time that the Cavs were shifting into that rebuild, a lot of the young guys didn't know how to play. They weren't at the same level from an intellectual standpoint as Kevin.
Sure.
And it's like, he knew how to play the right way. He knew what it looked like to be a good team and what the Cavs were trying to accomplish on a possession-to-possession basis. And these other young guys are trying to figure it out. So he was getting frustrated by the fact that he didn't have anybody in that locker room that knew how to play intellectually at the same level as he did. And he felt like he was trying to carry the guys along and try and show them the right way. And he's an emotional guy.
Yeah.
And he can get frustrated, and he lets his emotions at times, he'll admit this, get the best of him. But in saying that, even when he was having those temper tantrums, even when he wasn't looking like the best teammate, his teammates loved him and looked up to him. They're like, that's a Hall of Famer right there.
Right.
That's a guy that we can rock with right there.
Yeah. You know, another veteran they brought in last year was Ricky Rubio, and it seemed like he made a huge impact on this team, and especially Darius Garland. Now, he got hurt, and the team didn't play as well then. He wasn't the only one to get hurt, obviously. They brought him back. I know he's not going to be ready to go at the beginning of the season, but tell me, just how big an impact was he on this team, and when do you think we will see him back on the court?
I use 3 numbers all the time to try and quantify his impact, because I don't think people from the outside understand just how big of an impact Ricky Rubio had. It was the intangibles, but it was also the tangibles.
Yeah.
With him in the lineup, they were 24-14.
Yeah. They were great.
I mean, they were a great basketball team. And beyond that, with him in the lineup and Darius Garland in the lineup together, that was the Cavs' best 2-man grouping. You can think about all the different players, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, Lauri Markkanen, and Evan Mobley. You can do that with all these different 2-man lineups. The most formidable offensively and the best defensively combined, it was Ricky Rubio and Darius Garland. So the Cavs understood how having that type of player who could take some pressure off of Darius, that can create a little bit, that can initiate offense, that can run the offense and put Darius off the ball. They understood by having Rubio here how much Darius needs a player like that, hence Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
The other thing that Rubio brought to the table is just leadership and positivity, right? If you think about his history, there's a reason why some people label him the guard whisperer. Donovan Mitchell has talked about the impact that Ricky Rubio had on his career. Anthony Edwards has talked about the impact Rubio has had. Yeah. And Devin Booker, same thing. Yeah. And you don't think about Ricky as that kind of guy, but every single one of those players has singled out Ricky as somebody who has taken them to the next level. And Darius Garland felt the same thing. And even if it was only for half a season, the value of what the Cavs got Darius to become because of Ricky, it's really, really hard to put, a value on that.
Yeah, invaluable. So when would you think we'll see him on the court this year?
Everything that I have heard is that he is progressing well. He hasn't had any setbacks.
Yeah.
But Ricky internally and the Cavs internally keep talking about 12 to 13 months. And because they signed him to a multi-year deal and they understand guys coming back from a torn ACL are going to be better in year 2 than year 1, they're
Right.
not going to rush it.
Yeah,
So
sure.
if you think about 12 months, that's the end of December from when he tore his ACL. So I think it's more realistic that he's back on the court early February.
Yeah. Okay. And that's fine.
Yeah.
The Cavs also brought in a big man veteran this year, and that's Robin Lopez, who seems to fit with this team. I mean, we had one of our guys on the show had a chance to do like a quick interview with him, and he was hilarious. I mean, he seems like a perfect fit for this team. Is that the case? And what kind of role will he have on the court?
He's also a great fit from this standpoint. You need guys, you need veterans that are going to be on your bench that understand and accept their role and aren't going to try and go above and beyond that. You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
Robin Lopez is at the point of his career where he knows he's no longer a starter.
Right,
Robin Lopez is at the point of his career where he understands I'm just probably going to be used for 10 to 12 minutes a night in specific matchups.
Sure.
And that's what the Cavs are looking at from him. You know, when they play against the bigger guys like Vucevic in Chicago and Embiid in Philadelphia, and they need somebody to do the backup center minutes other than Evan Mobley, then that's going to be Robin Lopez.
Quick break here, and then more with Chris Fedor in the bullpen with Adam the Bull. All right, we are back. There you go. I'll add the commercial in after. And now I just told everybody, but that's okay. I keep it real. So I got to give you credit. When Koby Altman first got the job, and clearly he made mistakes, some mistakes in the beginning.
Oh, sure.
When he got the job, you had a lot of faith in him. And I don't know if there was a single other person in this city that thought he was any good. I mean, I crushed him. Everybody was killing him.
Yeah.
And again, some of the things he did in the beginning, it was fair to be critical. But as we now look back as to what he's done to this point, we all, and I've already given my on-air apology to him, but I'm sure, not that he cares.
No.
But I'm sure a lot of people owe him an apology because he has done a tremendous job.
Yeah.
And so credit to you because you were right. How big a factor is it that at least it seems that Dan Gilbert, who often has been, it seems like, too involved with the GM, seems to, in this case, have let Koby do his job, and that Koby and JB Bickerstaff have really picked up that mantle, and both, to this point in their Cavs career, I'd give them both an A. I would have to give Koby actually an A+, honestly, at this point.
Yeah.
JB still has more to prove on the court, but I don't know. How big a factor is that, Ben? And is he really have more power than some of the other GMs, do you think, at this point?
Well, look, Dan's going to be involved in the biggest decisions that happen with the organization. He's going to want to know what the Cavs are thinking. He's going to want final approval, and he should get that. That's his responsibility as the chairman of this organization. But I do think Koby has a little bit more freedom, in part because of this. Even before Koby became general manager and now president of basketball operations, he was with the organization. So Dan knew of him. They had a working relationship. There was a built-in trust there. And Dan saw how Koby worked. Dan saw how Koby thought. They had conversations. So that level of trust that was built between Koby and Dan before Koby got to this point, I think that's a big part of this whole thing. Dan doesn't feel like as much he needs to step in because he believes in Koby in a different kind of way. And he has given him that freedom to execute this rebuild in the vision that he wanted. And I think one of the biggest things that I give Dan Gilbert credit for, and even Koby Altman credit for, rebuilds take time in the NBA.
Sure.
And some of them don't work. We understand that.
Many don't work.
Ask Sacramento.
Yeah.
Ask Orlando. It is really, really difficult to rebuild in the NBA. It takes a lot of luck. It takes a lot of patience. And I give Dan and Koby a lot of credit that they were patient. They had a plan. They believed in the plan, and they stuck to it even through the losses. Because you know this is a bottom line business. These guys are emotional. Koby Altman leaves games pissed off, so much so that he has to call some of his other front office members to talk him down because he's so emotionally invested in this, just like the players, just like the coaches, just like the fans. losing is very, very difficult, but you have to handle it the right way and understand that that's just part of it when you go through a rebuild. And winning and losing in the NBA and team sports is a measure of you against the other team as a whole. It doesn't account for the individual moves that you were getting right along the way that just didn't have an opportunity to come together in the grand vision.
Chris, as we look at the grand vision of this season, it seems like as the Cavs have gotten better, that this is the best the East has been in a very long time. Right? I mean,
yes.
For many of the years that LeBron was on the Cavs, the rest of the East stunk, or there was maybe like one or two other good teams. Like the Cavs, as good as I think they are, they could still end up in the play-in round. I don't think that's impossible. I don't think they will, but it's not impossible because the East is so deep, right? There's no guarantees. I mean, there's a lot of good teams, and we talked about it, until Mobley's the best player. Well, so what's your expectation? What's like best case scenario for the Cavs this year and worst case, reasonable best and reasonable worst case scenario?
To your point, Bull, I was talking to an opposing executive about this over the weekend. And I said, okay, what do you think of the Cavs? Where do you think they're going to fall in the Eastern Conference? And then he spun it back to me. And I said, look, if you're talking about the Cavs avoiding the play-in tournament and getting one of the locked-in playoff spots in the Eastern Conference,
right?
That means you are excluding one of Chicago, Toronto, or Atlanta. Atlanta, they got better this offseason because they traded for DeJounte Murray as well. And Atlanta, that beat the Cavs last year in the play-in tournament, and the year before that, got to the Eastern Conference Finals, right? So if you're talking about the Cavs in the top 6, you are excluding one of those 3 teams, which is really, really difficult to do, unless you feel like Brooklyn is going to completely implode and they're going to trade all of their pieces and they're not going to have an opportunity for their talent, which is high-level talent, to actually come together.
Yeah, I mean, it does make it tricky, right? You never know. Like, some team could have a ton of injuries. Anything could, Giannis could go down. You never know. But you're right. I mean, and that's it. So you're looking.
You talk about Boston, Milwaukee first, always.
Yep.
Then you talk about Philadelphia, Brooklyn from a talent perspective, and Miami's not going anywhere.
No, they're always good.
Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero.
Yeah.
Eric Spoelstra is the head coach.
Yeah,
they're not going anywhere.
No.
So those are probably the 5 that you speak of first.
Right.
And now you're talking about the Cavs in that category with Toronto, Chicago, and Atlanta. I think they can avoid the play-in tournament, but I like those other teams as well. So I think based on what they've done this offseason, Bull, if they had to fight their way into the playoffs through the play-in tournament, I think that would be a bad look. When you trade for a player Donovan Mitchell. So to me, they need a guaranteed locked-in playoff spot this year. It's not championship or bust, right?
No,
They're
sure.
Not $50 million into the luxury tax. They don't have all these aging veterans. They're not threatening to implode if they don't actually compete for a championship. There's a window here of 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Maybe even longer than that, depending on what happens with Donovan Mitchell. So they don't have to look at it as championship or bust. But when you go out and acquire a player like Donovan Mitchell, you better be a playoff team. You better get Darius Garland the kind of experience that he needs, and Evan Mobley, and all these young guys. They need to feel the playoffs. They need that 7-game series in order to take the next step as an organization.
No doubt. Earlier you talked about the Cavs maybe still looking to replace Lauri Markkanen and maybe another big guy. I know it. It didn't work for him the first time he was here, but Jay Crowder obviously wants to be traded. I know the Cavs are like right up against the luxury tax. You'll know. I don't know exactly how much, but I know they're close. We know Dan has been willing to go over it for good teams before. Is that on the radar at all? And does that make sense?
It's on the radar, but I don't think it's realistic. It's on the radar from the standpoint of he's playoff tested.
Yep.
He can knock down threes. He can play defense. And he can fill your biggest void, right? But beyond that, there's not a whole bunch of interest from the Cavs in Jay Crowder. And I think there are other teams that would be willing to give Phoenix one more than what the Cavs would, and I think there are other teams that would be more interested in Jay than the Cavs would as well.
Okay,
The other thing to consider here is that part of the reason why Jay Crowder doesn't want to be in Phoenix, by the way, Phoenix, one of the best teams in the Western Conference, despite some of the issues that they have internally. One of the reasons why he doesn't want to be there is because he doesn't have a locked-in starting spot, and he feels like he has earned that.
Gotcha.
There is not a locked-in starting spot waiting for Jay Crowder.
No.
I can't sit here and say if the Cavs traded for him, he would definitely be the starting 3 for the Cavs.
Right. That's a fair point. But they do have one roster spot open. So if it's not now, I mean, do you think at the trade deadline they might be actively looking for a player to fill that role?
Sure, this is an aggressive front office. This is a front office that's always looking. If they go through the first half of the season, Bull, and they say, okay, the Karis LeVert at the 3 thing does not work, right? Or Isaac Okoro doesn't make the steps offensively that we needed him to make, or Dean Wade can't be in the starting lineup because he's just not at that level of his career yet, then the Cavs would explore that. They've explored it in the past. The price for those kinds of players, Harrison Barnes, Bogdanovich, throw out any name that you want to that can play the 3 at a starting caliber level. It's going to be really, really high. And the Cavs obviously don't have a ton of assets. They don't have a ton of financial flexibility remaining. True. But they're still going to be paying attention because just like everybody else believes that that's the weak point for the Cavs, like this front office, they're not dummies. They understand that starting Karis LeVert at the 3 in the NBA today is probably not ideal, but it might just happen to be the best option that they have.
Chris, last thing, the Cavs won 44 games last year. Over under 50.5 wins for the Cavs. 50.5. What do you got?
I think under, honestly. I mean, I think they're right around 50.
Yeah.
I think there are growing pains that they're going to experience with Darius and Donovan together. And I just think the East is so difficult.
Yeah.
That it's hard to find, the easy gimme wins in the Eastern Conference.
That's
obviously, true. You have the bottom of the barrel teams. Every
There's
conference
not many.
is going to have that.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a grind to get to 50. Not everybody can win 50 in the Eastern Conference.
It's tough.
Even as talented as I think the Cavs are.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun season. I think fans will enjoy I think at times with LeBron, fans didn't enjoy the ride because there was so much expected.
You're right.
And I think that's why we enjoyed this Guardian season, and we've enjoyed that. And certainly people enjoyed the Cavs season last year. Obviously, there's more expected this year than last year, but I think anybody realistic is not expecting a championship this year.
Right.
And I think people will enjoy the ride of the Cavs again this year, especially because, as we've talked about, they're likable. It seems like it's the least ego team I've ever seen in any sport. It feels like it's probably not that case, but they just seem like they have no egos, these guys. I don't know. But anyway, Chris, awesome stuff, man. Thank you for joining me.
Bull, you got it. The other thing is stylistically, they're going to be fun, right? Lobs, three-pointers, drives to the basket, kickouts. That's a fun style. And I think the Cavs are going to bring that, especially with the personnel that they have.
Great stuff, Chris. We'll talk to you again during the season.
Sounds good, Bull. Anytime, man.
All right, it's been a Tuesday edition of the Bullpen. We'll talk to you tomorrow. We'll get into, obviously, Guardians, Yankees, Game 5, hopefully moving on to the ALCS to play the Astros. We'll see you.